Brought to you by BedroomBattlefields.com, this is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Casey, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, popular demand this is. The people have spoken, you've answered the call, so it's great to have a wee chat at last. Creator of Space Weirdos.
Yeah, I actually, I haven't been on a podcast before. I don't know. I just kind of keep a low profile, just kind of do what I do. So, but the guys on the Discord demanded it.
Yeah, and what better podcast to make your podcasting debut than
Right.
this Mickey Mouse outfit? So, so Space Weirdos, a cult classic. Like it's a game I hear mentioned all the time. I've got it myself. I've got Sword Weirdos. So, I mean, talk us through 2021. I think it was when you put this game together. I mean, how long was it in the works before it actually saw the light of day?
Well, like a lot of things, it was kind of a pandemic project, started kind of working on it, in 2020 with, nothing better to do than tinker with rules and paint minis. Um, I was kind of, basing it on, so I've just to jump ahead a little bit, I have a game coming out from Osprey in August, Void Fighter. That game started out called Snub Fighter, just the generic Star Wars term for X-Wings and stuff like that. And I'd been tinkering with that and those rules for many years. And then, so when I started thinking that I wanted to write my, a skirmish game, I was like, well, I already kind of have like the basics from Snub Fighter. So why don't I just see if that'll work for a skirmish game as well as a spaceship game? So I kind of took those and went from there. I had, I did that one through Kickstarter's Zine Quest month, and it got some traction from that, which was nice. And previously, I'd had self-published a role-playing game called Stay Frosty, and a company called, or a game publisher in Poland called Nerd Sirens had approached me, and they wanted to do a Polish version of Stay Frosty, and I'd agreed to that. That was great. That's super fun. And Lucas Kowalczyk, the artist for the Stay Frosty in Polish, was like, you should have me do your cover. And that was absolutely the right move because Lucas's art is immediately eye-catching. So once Space Weirdos was done, put it on Wargame Vault, and I'm sure that his cover is just immediately drawing people's eye, and so that got them to check it out. And it was doing great. I mean, better than my role playing game had done. And then Uncle Adam from the Tabletop Minions YouTube channel had seen it and mentioned it in some of his videos, and that's when it absolutely took off. You cannot do better than having a popular YouTuber talk about your game, and that was how it really took off, and it's been steady ever since. It's still going strong.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that. I literally remember him talking about the game. So I mean, you've mentioned two things there: the artwork, which I did want to ask you about as well, because it's so distinctive and compelling. So you had that on your side already, and then like you say, Uncle Adams talked about it. So talk me through the kind of moment you realised that had gone out. Like, had he been in touch with you at all, or was this just a complete surprise?
It's funny because our connected social media world that we live in, he messaged me on Facebook, and the message did not get lost because we actually had a friend in common. One of my wife's friends from high school and college had actually worked with him um, uh, at now I'm forgetting where they worked, but they had worked together and lived in the same town. And so when he messaged me, the message didn't get, flushed into the here's someone you don't know messaging you. So I saw that, and he was like, "Hey, I have this YouTube channel, and where can I get a T-shirt of the cover?" And so we started talking then. So he tracked me down because he had their oh, now I'm going to forget the name of it. Their first game, Snarling
Or
Badger's first game, the
yeah,
demon
Rain in Hell.
Rain and Hell it came out at the same time. They published that at the same time. So I'm looking at the front page of War Game Vaults, and I'm like, well, Rain and Hell I'm right behind him. I'm number two and he's number one, or I'm number three or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, it must have been really cool that. I mean, obviously, I would second guess you here and say you wouldn't have made the game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't have made the game because you thought it would be massive. Like, I'm assuming you kind of made it as, for yourself first and
No,
foremost,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. I'd been messing around with some other rules that were just, that were not Games Workshop rules. Like, okay, I love all my, Space Marines, and I was kit bashing like Inquisitors and stuff like that. So I just wanted something. Um, I just can't help myself. I've always been a rules tinkerer. So I just started messing around with, like I said, my snub fighter rules, and it turned out pretty good. But yeah, I was only doing it for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, what were you kind of looking to do in Space Weirdos that you maybe didn't feel you were getting elsewhere?
Um, I always feel like everything is overwritten. Rules are way longer than they need to be, more complicated. Like the the worst offender is like some Fantasy Flight Games miniatures rules, like X-wing. I'd see people playing X-wing, and they've got like a million different cards in front of them just to fly around some spaceships. That just doesn't seem like fun to me to have all these extra accoutrements all over the place. I don't mind some tokens and stuff like that. That's all fine. But uh, uh, I'd read Kill Team, and Kill Team was good, um, but it was still like too much for what I was looking for. I'm usually looking for some way to bash some minis together, but I want a little bit of crunchiness too. So not just like, okay, we both have a 50% chance of doing something to one another. I want it to be a little more than that, but not so much that I need to consult the rule book all the time.
Mm,
So I just am always looking for a middle ground, and trying to write as concisely as possible, to get the most out of the least amount of word.
mhm. Did you find any particularly tough challenges to overcome when you were putting the rule set together?
For Space Weirdos, not really, because I was kind of just winging it, you know. I think um, it was maybe like there's always the tendency is like, okay, you can go two ways when you're writing a skirmish game. If you want you can you know have everybody have hit points like Warcry, or Frostgrave or something like that, and so you got to keep track of your all your dudes' hit points, or you can have like just like a condition or a status or something like that that shows that they're wounded or vulnerable, something like that, like Song of Blades and Heroes has their, if you're down, you better not get attacked again, or you're going to get taken out. So I just decided to go that way. But then I also um, was talking to Chris McDowell, who wrote,
The Doomed.
Bastion Land, and the Doomed, yeah. While he was designing that and I was designing Space Weirdos, we were on the same Discord, and so we would chat about it. And so the idea, kind of working off of what he was doing, having the hit table be more than just like um, damaging someone. It's like, okay, something happens. What is it? Is it that they get to shoot back? Is it that they have to move, dive for cover, all that stuff? The under attack table in Space Weirdos and Sword Weirdos kind of just adds that bit of randomness, and that was the main thing. Like once I had that, then everything else kind of fell into place.
Cryovolcano, a solo scenario that could be played with any sci-fi skirmish rule set and miniatures, is now available on the Bedroom Battlefields Patreon. It was originally published in Miniature Wargames magazine, and you'll now find everything you need to play it, along with a whole host of additional bonus content over at patreon.com/bedroombattlefields. That's patreon.com/bedroombattlefields. And now back to the show. One of the areas that you hear people really complimenting Space Weirdos is around its kind of elegant dice mechanics. Can you talk to us a wee bit about that system and give us a wee introduction to it for anyone who's not played the game before?
Sure. Lots of games just go with one kind of dice, like all GWNs just use six-siders, and I mean, I play a lot of Saga. Saga's all six-siders. But, I started off as a D&D player, so I've got lots of D&D dice. But I also like bell curves. I love the bell curve of, 2d6. Love a 2d6 table that balances out nicely. And so I just thought that instead of having people add modifiers to rolls, and like, I don't know if you were a bolt action player, but like second edition bolt action with just a gigantic list of plus and minus ones to your roll, and now you have to apply that to like the 16 dice that you're throwing. It's kind of a pain. So I just, if you have an advantage, we'll go up a dice type on, we've got D4, D6, D8, D10, D12. If your stat for shooting is 2d8 and someone's behind cover, now their defense goes up a die type because they've got an advantage. And if you aimed and you're taking your time to shoot, then your die type goes up. So now you're 2d10. So I just liked that. Just instead of having these static modifiers that you have to keep track of, to just go up a die type or down a die type. And that ends up being the equivalent of like a +4 or something like that to the roll. But it's more fun to change the kind of dice you're rolling. And you never need more than 2. You're only ever rolling 2 dice. You're not rolling buckets of dice.
Do you find the feedback, people resonate with that, getting to use all these different types of dice?
They actually do. People seem to like it. Whenever it gets reviewed, there was I can't remember the guy's name. I wasn't thinking of it before. A guy from the Chicago skirmish. They've got a skirmish group there.
Carol.
Yeah. He wrote a whole article about the math. He thought about the math of Space Weirdos way more than I ever have,
Yeah.
But the reason I went with that is because that's what I was using for Snub Fighter when I was designing that. And when I started out with that, I was going crazy with it. Like, your attack would have like 3d8. It wasn't just like 2 dice. It could be 3 dice or 4. The difference between 3d8 and 4d6. And after a while, when I started doing Space Weirdos, like, okay, I'm just gonna 2 dice the same type, and we'll just go up and down like that instead of things get a little too chaotic if you go beyond that.
Another wee thing that you've done is to replace the tape measure with sticks. Can you tell us a wee bit about that?
Oh, there's a bunch of games that I like that we're already doing that. Um, Song of Blades and Heroes. Um, what else? Saga uses sticks. Um, Dead Man's Hand uses sticks. So I like that. I don't really like tape measures. I mean, tape measures are fine when I got to use one for a game. That's fine. But I like just being able to, you know, grab the stick. And so that was one of my design um, uh, things that I was definitely going to use. Is I was going to use one kind of stick for Space Weirdos. And then I had to decide, it's like, okay, 6 inches too long. So if someone moves 3 times or move 18 inches across the table, is that too much? So that's why I just was like, okay, I'll just make it a little shorter. And make it 5 inches. And that was really as much thought as I put into it. But then that's carried over to Sword Weirdos uh, and for Void Fighter now, we will have um, since that's a little more complicated a game, 3 sizes of sticks. We'll have 10 inches, 5 inches, and then 2.5 inches. But I do explain how you can just have one size stick and get away with it. So the people that have become hardcore know I only want to use one stick can still do that.
Mm.
They might just need a few more.
I want to ask you a wee bit about Sword Weirdos, but you mentioned Void Fighter there.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a wee bit more about what to expect for that game? You said it was Osprey are publishing it.
Yep, yep. It'll be in the Blue Book War Games series. It's coming out in August. Um, the art looks just fantastic for it. You can see the cover if you Google it. It should be fun. Um, when I was so it kind of goes hand in hand with Sword Weirdos because I was finishing up the writing on Sword Weirdos. I'd done the Kickstarter and should have been working on that exclusively, but then I got um, a brainwave and started tinkering with Snub Fighter again, and I had to put it aside and say to myself, okay, you need to finish Sword Weirdos, and then when that's done and handed in, then you can allow yourself to um, uh, send Osprey a proposal um, for Snub Fighter. So that's what I did. And so I wrote up a proposal and I basically just said, hey, I've got these other games that I do. Here's what I want to do. And you've got a great fleet game with Billion Suns, but you don't have a dog fighting game. And they basically wrote back right away and said, yeah, let's do it. Can you turn this into 80,000 words? And I had about 6,000 or something like that in the sample that I sent them. And I was like, yeah, no problem. It was way longer than anything I'd ever written before. I've never written anything that long. So,
What are all the extra words for?
well, it has a bunch of stuff that if I had just made it into a zine like Space Weirdos or Sword Weirdos, it might have been a little longer than either of those. Like I maybe would have expanded it to um, 24 pages or something like that in that booklet zine format. But okay, so what goes into Void Fighter that's not in Space and Sword Weirdos? There's a bunch of fiction. Um, there's uh, way more terrain than I probably would have put in otherwise. I just kept going with, weird space anomalies and asteroids and, all kinds of things that you can add to your game. Um, I don't have campaign rules in either Space or Sword Weirdos because when I was publishing them, I was like, okay, this is a zine. Campaign rules take up, considerable space. So I'm just going to leave them out. You can thinking that people would just, cannibalize whatever campaign rules they had from whatever other game. People do what I found is people do like to have campaign rules in their rules, because that's the first question everyone asks. So Void Fighter does have campaign rules, and there's only room for a few scenarios in Space and Sword Weirdos. They're pretty short, but Void Fighter has 12 scenarios. Actually 13 with the intro scenario. So that's quite a bit of word, and then a lot more word devoted to pre-made ships. Like you can build your own fleet, you can build your own squadron with the rules, just like you can with Space and Sword Weirdos. But I fleshed out several factions with many different ships of all the classes of ships available for all the factions. Um, so that's a big chunk too. So uh, the if I'd done it as a zine, it would have had a couple scenarios, and just a few ship types, and then no, probably wouldn't have had any fiction whatsoever.
What was it that inspired you to pitch it to Osprey rather than, you'd obviously published yourself previously?
Uh, just because this is whole rule writing thing for me has kind of been, I mean, I've been doing it for a few years now, but it's just an experiment. Um, I've had done zines and was like, okay, well, what happens if I send this to Osprey? And so I just wanted to see what would happen, really. Um, so luckily they liked the idea, and they uh, hit on it right away. So that, I mean, I'm sure not a common experience for everyone. I mean, I always see people talking about, rejected or whatever for their book, that whatever it is they're doing, and I just got lucky. I got lucky. Um, had the right idea at the right time.
Were you pleasantly surprised when they came back and said, let's do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I was actually shocked at how fast it all happened. But then, agreeing to do it was very fast, because that was back in 2022, beginning of 2023. Yeah. And so we agreed to do it like then in the spring. And then it was several months before paperwork was signed. And then at that point, it was like, well, our schedule's already so far out that we need your manuscript in a year. So this stuff the traditional publishing route takes a lot longer.
Is that totally signed and sealed now, or is there still anything to be done on it?
Yeah, they're still working on art. I haven't seen their versions of the diagrams and things like that that will go in there. And then I'm sure there's still a couple more editing passes to go. But I'm kind of expecting that I'll get another draft to look over in a little bit here.
It must be I mean, it's not happened yet, but it must be a great experience to get the book for the first time and have a wee look through it, and then inevitably spot a spelling mistake within 15 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just waiting for that to happen. It's incredible how many times you can read a manuscript and find something
Yeah,
wrong every single time. It's like there's an infinite number of errors in every book, and you will never run out of them.
yeah. And yet, you've read the draft a million times. You're
Yep.
certain it's like flawless. But yeah, the minute
Yep.
it transfers to that nice glossy paper, then there's a TEH or something in there somewhere.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, I mean, that's definitely one to look forward to. And of course, we were talking there about Sword Weirdos, which is a game that's existed for a while. So, how long
Yeah.
after Space Weirdos being out did you want to do Sword Weirdos and get that out there?
Well, people kept on asking, like, when are you going to do a fantasy version? Because if you've got a sci-fi version of something, they want a fantasy version of it, right? Um, so um, it was kind of I was kind of like doing I was listening to the people, and they wanted a fantasy version, so it's like, well, I'm not going to do it until I can think of an angle for it. Um, like I don't want it to just be a reskin. I want to do something different, and that's another thing that I've kind of done with all my rule sets is that I want to do something different every time. Or people have asked, "Are you going to do second edition of Space Weirdos?" And I've said, "No, not for a long time because I've got other stuff that I want to do. They're a progression of what I have done." So I didn't want it to just be like a rehash of um, Space Weirdos with swords. So once I came up with the idea that instead of using command points for that the special actions that you can do in Space Weirdos, that we would let the minis do like cool moves with their weapons with the command points instead, and every weapon would have like a cool maneuver that it could do with that particular weapon. So you'd have a reason to have like in your army, in your war band, a guy with a sword and a guy with an axe and a guy with a flail, because all three of those weapons can do something different. So that was kind of the once I hit on that idea, and then I decided to add like a quote unquote class system so that you'd have something like making you're basically making little D&D characters with every mini that you stat up. Um, I thought that was really fun. You just look at a mini and you can tell, okay, he should have this. He's only wearing leather armor, so he should have low armor. So maybe that's 2d6. He's got a rapier, so we'll give him uh, thrusting sword from the weapons chart. He looks like he's a pretty good fencer, so we'll make his might 2d8, and he looks pretty tough, so we'll give him a willpower of 2d8 too. And so like just be able to look at a mini and then give it exactly what you see there was the idea. And so kind of that was the idea that let me feel like I had enough difference between Sword Weirdos and Space Weirdos that it was worth um, writing a whole new game for.
With sort of, doing the sci-fi skirmish, and then you've got like the fantasy skirmish, if you like, and you've got the dog fighting game now. Are you kind of scratching these itches for different types of games? Like, will there be a mass fantasy rank and flank game at some point in the future?
There's probably not going to be a rank and flank game because Hobgoblin exists, and it's not rank and flank, but I play a ton of Saga, and so that kind of scratches that itch that I've got to put a bunch of either fantasy or historical minis on the table and um, play those kind of games. So I'm more inclined to write rules that where the games that are out there are not scratching the itch. So I am working on Squad Weirdos, which will be like a um, larger scale version of Space Weirdos with a sci-fi squad based game.
What are some games that you like? Not your own games, but games that you play. Like you mentioned a couple earlier on. You mentioned Song of Blades and Heroes. What are some ones that kind of spring to mind?
Yeah, Song of Blades and Heroes I played a ton of. That was like easy enough to play with your kids. So played that with my daughter when she was little. Um, right now, like I said, I play a lot of Saga. I've got an army for just about every one of the different ages that they have a book out for. I don't think I didn't paint my Persians yet, so I don't have an Age of Alexander army. But I think I'm working on um, English for Age of Chivalry right now, painting those guys up. So I'm painting a lot of archers and guys with bill hooks. Um, I play a lot of bolt action these days. I'm not real good at it, but I feel like I'm I'm getting better, and that kind of can scratch that, you know, that 40K itch a little bit. It's a pretty good game, but mostly it's a pretty popular game. So I have actually attempted playing in some tournaments for Bolt Action. Um, Looking forward to the new version of Conflict 47 whenever that comes out. Got a 3D printed armies for that, British, German, and Americans. Me and a buddy of mine actually just played a kind of um, combined bolt action third edition plus conflict 47 game, just kind of hybrid rules, and that was a lot of fun. I love Weird War stuff, so really looking forward to that. um, I haven't gotten Hobgoblin on the table yet, but I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I've played it now and really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more of that for sure. Um, Talk to us a wee bit about your hobby origins then. Like if we go back in time, how did you encounter the hobby initially?
Sure. I've been playing D&D since I was like 10 years old, something like that. And I'm 50 now. So I'm the same age as Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, so I've been playing for a long time. Um, and as a kid, I'm from a small town in North Dakota. So not a lot of opportunities for wargaming or role playing games, really. I had to go to, we had to drive 90 miles that I could get to a store that would have any, a Dragon magazine or D&D books or anything like that. Um, but I bought the battle system, the second edition D&D TSR battle system box set when I was a kid. And that was like the Dungeons and Dragons math battle game. And it came with like hundreds of little chits that you could pop out. And I was too young to wrap my head around that, but I liked having the chits. I thought those were fun, and I would use those when we played D&D sometimes. And then uh, I had a copy of Dungeon Bowl, so that the dungeon expansion for Blood Bowl. But I did not have Blood Bowl. I did not know that that was just an expansion and not its own game. But it came with a board, and it came with plastic dwarves and elves. So my friend that I played D&D with and we just kind of filled in the blanks and used what we had to play a few games of Dungeon Bowl. Um, uh, but then we also had Hero Quest. Would play that with my little brother. He was 7 years younger than me, so I would run Hero Quest for my brother and his friends, and then just played D&D until third edition came out, and then that was more focused on um, you know miniatures, or at least playing your combat encounters on a grid. And so I started experimenting with buying some minis. I moved to the big city by then, so I could go to a game store, RIP Phoenix Games, that isn't around anymore, and go buy a couple Reaper minis and started painting. And after that, um, I started painting a couple armies for Reaper. Had a miniatures game called Warlord, and I had an army for that. And Wizards of the Coast came out with their with third edition D&D, the chainmail, the new chainmail, kind of a skirmish game with D&D monsters, and my friends and I played that quite a bit, and that was pretty fun. So I did not come in through Games Workshop. My Games Workshop um, uh, exposure had, dead ended with with Dungeon Bowl. So I would be looking, once I started painting minis, I'd be staring at the giant box of, Cadian, the giant battle box that came with, like a tank and a bunch of artillery and like 100 guys or something like that, and would kind of drool over it, but I never pulled the trigger on um, any Games Workshop stuff until much later.
And when was that?
I think, what was it? Was it eighth edition that has the Plague Marines and the when they came out with the Primaris Marines? I think that was eighth edition.
Right.
I bought that box set because people were talking about it online, and I was like, oh, new models and stuff like that. This looks like fun. So that's when I started painting Games Workshop stuff, and I've still never played a proper game of 40K. I played a few games of Kill Team, but that's pretty much it. But I got but I got a ton of models for sure.
Is it a lot of the newer Games Workshop stuff you've got, or what does your miniature collection look like?
Um, yeah, newer Games Workshop stuff for sure. I think they were still making, they would sell for $10. They would sell like that little 3-pack of Space Marines, or there were Chaos Marines that was just like one little sprue. They were, I bought the Chaos Marines to kind of get back um, into painting, because I'd taken kind of a break, with little kids and stuff like that. And when I started painting again, um, uh, those were some of the first ones that I picked up. And then I was like, well, okay, I'll try this. I'll get this eighth edition box set and just get a bunch of minis and see what happens. But my minis collection these days, I still got a ton of old Reaper and Wizards of the Coast minis from that chainmail game. Um, I used a bunch of those for playtesting for Sword Weirdos. Those all make perfect minis for Sword Weirdos. Um, uh, Plastic stuff, I've got like bolt action and um, oh, what else? Victric for historicals. But I'm 3D printing these days as well, so I got a resin printer and am printing too much stuff for myself. All the pictures of the ships and Void Fighter are 3D printed by me from a couple of different sculptors that are listed in the book. So I do a lot of 3D printing these days too. But I've kind of gotten back into just buying minis because 3D printing is kind of a pain, and stick to the more expensive stuff. Like I don't want to buy a bunch of tank sets. So if I've got like a bespoke tank that I want for bolt action or something like that, it's easy enough to just print one instead of going and buying a $50 kit for that. But buying ready to go plastic minis uh, seems worth it, even for the cost sometimes, as opposed to 3D printing them, just because of the hassle.
Our question of the month for March 2025 is, what's the coolest bit of terrain you've ever built? And bonus points for the unlikely source material too. Get your audio clip in over at bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail, and I need them in by Friday the 28th of March. That's bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail, and now back to the show. Have you ever been approached by any miniature manufacturers about potentially doing a range for Weirdos or any of your games?
Um, Not really. Talked about a tiny little bit, but it never went anywhere. Actually, War Games Atlantic sells Sword Weirdos and Space Weirdos through their website. I think they'd heard about them, and they've got what's their range? Death Fields are their kind of their sci-fi range, and they just wanted to have some rules on their website that would go along with be a good match for their minis. So they've got a couple other games that they sell on their website as well. And so they sell a few every month, which is nice. And it was nice to be like, hey, we want your rules to be associated with our minis. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, aye, that's cool. So you said that they're selling a couple a month. Is that right?
Void Fighter.
The if they're selling Sword and Space Weirdos, like are the sales pretty decent through?
Oh yeah, they're yeah that 5 to 10 every month or something like that on their website.
Yeah,
Um, Obviously, I sell a lot more on War Game Vault, but um, they uh, it makes up for any War Games Atlantic minis that I buy.
yeah.
And I just bought some from them too, so I got their medieval peasants. I'm going to use those for Saga. So they've got some nice kits too.
How often do you get to paint, like on a given week?
I haven't been painting except for some Saga minis. I need to get back into it, so I've kind of been off it. But I want to get all my Saga stuff painted up. I'm pretty lucky that kids are older now, so weekends I can usually like get away to play a game if I want to, um, which is real nice. And there's a lot of players here, so if I want to play a game, I usually can, which is real nice.
Yeah, so you've got a regular group that you could meet with.
Yep, yep, yep. A lot of the actually some of the best Saga players in the country are right here in Minneapolis. So I get to be beaten by the pros when I play.
How often do you get to play the Sword Weirdos and Space Weirdos? Do you still get enthusiastic about
I
playing them?
this is it's funny because I actually I usually don't play them. I don't always like playing my own games. If I play test them so much that I get sick of them.
Hmm.
And there are some guys that I game with here every once in a while, and sometimes they um, play Space Weirdos, and I'll come over and I've refereed a couple times, like just to kind of, oh, you bring all your minis, and I'll kind of, you don't have to know all the rules, and I'll kind of referee for a big game or something like that. So
Mm.
I'll do that. And then I ran it a bunch at some local conventions, and kind of got burned out on running demos. So I didn't do that this year. So yeah, it's funny. I don't usually I'd rather play someone else's game
Yeah.
than my own games.
I suppose that's better than the other way about. If you've got pals and they don't want to play it, and you're like, I've got a game if you want to play
Right,
it.
right, right, right. Yeah, and I don't want to get a big head about it. It's like, no, we don't need to play my game. We can play something else.
Yeah. But it must be enormously satisfying to see. It's played around the world. Folks over here, and when I was down at Bring Out Your Lead, and Ed, who I think
Yeah.
had put that big game on, and
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
so I just you'll be seeing it played all around
That is
the world.
it is the most gratifying thing, yes, is to know that you've written something that people liked, and they want to play. I watch just about every um, actual play that I find on YouTube, and I'll comment thanking them for playing it. I love to see that. I love to see pictures and blog posts of people playing my games. It really is the best thing about it. It's a little surreal because as a writer or game designer, you're just who does it as a hobby, not in an office doing it. I'm like doing it after work or on the weekend or something like that. So I'm not out there like uh, like a Games Workshop. Someone could go into a store and see people playing their games all the time, but I'm just sitting in my house, so it's nice to see people playing online, or posting their pictures and play reports and stuff like that online, and to see it all over the world too. That's why it's fun that there's a Polish version as well of Space Weirdos, and I don't know if they did Sword Weirdos. I'm not sure if they've done that yet, but to see, translation. Um, there was a guy that did a French translation, and so yeah, it's just real nice to see it resonating with people all over the world. Great.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for putting it together. Thanks for coming on the show and chatting about it. It's been great to hear. And obviously, we've got Void Fighter. Is it August, did you say?
August. Yep.
Hitting I was going to say hitting the stores. I don't know if that happens these days. It might. But
yeah, if you've got the kind of store that stocks Osprey books, and it's not every game store, it seems like there's too many game stores that are just like Magic cards and some 40K and some D&D, and that's it. But if you get to a little more a boutique store, and they've got some Osprey stuff, it should be there.
Is there anywhere the listener could go as well to keep up with your work, to look at, what you've got already?
Yeah, probably the Space Weirdos and Friends Discord is the best place. That's the place that I'm hanging out. I have a website. I can't figure out how to get the security certificate updated, so I don't post any updates there. So the Discord is really the best place.
Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then please do share it with someone else you think might enjoy it too. And be sure to check out our Discord community of like-minded hobbyists, which you could find at bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. It'd be great to see you in there.